toxic mother-in-law, and obsessive ex manipulated my husband for years. I've been married to Ethan for 2 years now. We had dated for 2 years before that, but we had known each other since high school. We didn't start dating until a couple of years after college, though. We randomly bumped into each other at a restaurant, exchanged numbers, went on a few dates, and, well, here we are, nearly 4 years later. Before me, Ethan had been in a long-term relationship with a girl from our school, Jessica. She was a year younger than us, and they had been together since middle school. Back in high school, Ethan and I weren't particularly close, but we had a lot of mutual friends, so I often saw him and Jessica together. After graduation, we lost touch because he went to college in another state, and we barely saw each other. When we finally reconnected at that restaurant years later, I asked him about Jessica. He told me they had broken up a year and a half earlier. Apparently, she was the one who ended things. She wanted to explore life and take a break from relationships. But she made sure to let him know that she'd come back to him one day. Yeah, right. Basically, she wanted the freedom to sleep around without guilt while keeping Ethan as a backup plan. After they split, they stayed friends at least. That's what she called it. Ethan, on the other hand, slowly started cutting ties with her. By the time we met again, he had mostly moved on. I started seeing him in a new light, too. He had changed a lot since our school days. After that night, we quickly hit it off and have had an easy, effortless relationship ever since. Ethan often tells me he never had that with Jessica. With her, it was always a game. She made him chase her because she thought it made her more desirable. She flirted with other guys, partied all the time, and wouldn't even check in with him for days. She never once considered how he felt about her behavior. Ethan stuck around because he was young, dumb, and convinced that their long history meant something. Another reason? His mother, Linda, absolutely adored Jessica. While they were together, Jessica spent a lot of time with Linda, and Linda practically worshipped her. Even after the breakup, she continued inviting Jessica to family gatherings, holiday dinners, you name it. Ethan asked her to stop, but she flat out refused, saying she loved Jessica like a daughter and saw no reason to cut her out just because the relationship ended. They were good friends, after all. They talked almost every week, and honestly, they were closer than I was comfortable with. This went on even after Ethan and I started dating. The first time he brought me home to meet his family was at Christmas, 4 years ago. By then, we had been together for nearly 8 months. And guess who was there? Jessica. She was awful to me the entire time, subtly, of course. Every little thing about me became her target. My height, my outfit, my makeup. She made it sound like innocent teasing, but Ethan saw right through it and tried to defend me. That's when Linda shut him down, asking me directly if I had a problem with Jessica's jokes. She put me on the spot, making it clear that if I said yes, I'd be the insecure, overly sensitive girlfriend. I knew exactly how that would play out, so I took a different approach. I just shrugged and said, I don't give a shit. Jessica and Linda's faces dropped. They looked surprised, irritated even. When we got home that night, Ethan apologized for what had happened and promised he wouldn't let his mother invite Jessica again. But I told him not to. I wasn't about to let them think they had gotten under my skin. I refused to give them the satisfaction. I made it clear to Ethan that I knew exactly what was happening and that I wouldn't let them push me out. Since then, Jessica has been at every single family event Linda has thrown. And every time, it's the same thing: passive-aggressive comments, backhanded compliments, and constant reminders of her and Ethan's past. No matter how irrelevant, it's a game to them. And I refuse to lose. I had endured everything with patience, keeping a calm facade. Sharon even made a few snide remarks over the years about how Jessica would have been a better daughter-in-law and how she was a more suitable wife for Ethan. It was infuriating, but I never let it show. As long as Ethan was by my side, their words meant nothing to me. Let them talk all they want, I didn't care. That's how I had dealt with them for the past 4 years, and I plan to keep handling it the same way for as long as necessary. I was not going to be the one to break first. No chance. And then, a few days ago, something happened. 3 days ago, Sharon was celebrating her 50th birthday with a big party for family and friends. This year, Ethan didn't want to go. One of his colleagues was having an engagement party on the same day, and he had been looking forward to attending. He had a valid reason his colleague was getting engaged once in his life, whereas Sharon had birthdays every damn year. But of course, Sharon guilt-tripped him into promising he would come to her party, wearing him down with relentless requests. So, in the end, we agreed to go. As expected, Jessica was invited, and for some reason, she showed up as if she was walking the red carpet. Even Sharon, the birthday girl, was dressed less extravagantly. But whatever, it was her circus. Ethan and I had already decided that we'd leave right after Sharon cut the cake and then head to his colleague's engagement party. At around 5:30 p.m., Ethan's father brought out the cake, or rather, cakes. To everyone's surprise, there were two of them. One had "Happy Almost Anniversary" written on it. Ethan and I had no idea what the hell that meant, and judging by the confused looks around the room, neither did the other guests. We all waited for Sharon to explain. But before she could, Jessica took center stage. With a smug smile, she grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him toward her. We were too stunned to react. The room fell silent, all eyes now on Ethan. And then Jessica started talking. She told everyone that almost 10 years ago, on Sharon's birthday, Ethan had gotten down on one knee and given her a promise ring. They were both 18 at the time, about to leave for different colleges. And apparently, she still wore that ring. She proudly held up her hand to show it off. Then, before anyone could react, she awkwardly wrapped her arms around Ethan in what was supposed to be a warm embrace. He did not return it. Sharon, ever the enabler, clapped her hands together and declared that she was more than happy to share her moment so that Ethan and Jessica could celebrate what could have been. The whole thing was so ridiculous that Ethan and I just stood there, completely frozen, mouths hanging open like a couple of idiots. So did most of the guests. No one knew what the hell to say because, honestly, how do you respond to something so absurd? Jessica, though, kept talking, laughing, giggling, referring to Ethan as her almost husband and Sharon as her almost mother-in-law. As if the guests hadn't already gotten the hilarious joke, she kept repeating how it was their almost anniversary. And then Sharon, still basking in whatever twisted fantasy she had built in her head, cut into the anniversary cake and offered the first slice to Jessica. Then she turned to Ethan, holding out a piece for him. But he had finally snapped out of his trance. As Sharon lifted the cake toward his face, he pulled away, looking at her like she had lost her damn mind. Sharon was visibly thrown off. She blinked at him in confusion and asked, "What's wrong?" And that was it. That was the moment Ethan exploded. For years, he had let them get away with this bullshit, but not anymore. Right there, in front of everyone, he let loose. He yelled at both of them, unleashing all the pent-up frustration he had been holding back for years. He called them shallow, manipulative, and selfish. He said he was ashamed that he had ever dated Jessica, and even more ashamed that he was related to Sharon by blood. He told them both, in no uncertain terms, that they were the most insufferable, pathetic women he had ever known. Even I was taken aback by his outburst. Ethan was the kind of guy who almost never raised his voice. It took a lot to make him truly angry, and Sharon, with Jessica's help, had finally pushed him over the edge. After he was done yelling, we left the party and took a cab straight to his colleague's engagement celebration. Ethan was quiet in the car. I tried to talk to him, to see if he wanted to vent, but he just shook his head. He didn't want to discuss his mother, or his ex. So, I let it go. By the time we arrived at the engagement party, his mood had shifted. Being around his friends and colleagues helped. He relaxed, laughed, and seemed genuinely happy again. Seeing that, I thought maybe he would be ready to talk about what happened once we got home. But when I brought it up later that night, he shut me down again. And then, he said something I didn't expect. He told me that I was partially to blame for all of this. Ethan agreed that Sharon and Jessica had deliberately humiliated me with that whole cake stunt, but he also pointed out that for years, I had insisted he stay out of it. I had told him not to interfere, to let them do whatever they wanted, because I wanted to prove that their bullshit didn't affect me. I had turned it into a personal battle, a game of pride, a test of my own resilience. And in doing so, I had completely ignored the fact that Ethan was stuck in the middle of it, suffering just as much, if not more. Nobody ever asked him how he felt about any of it. He never expected kindness from his mother. He certainly never expected it from Jessica. But he'd expected it from me, and in some way, he felt like I had failed him, because I had been so determined to prove myself to those women that I had never stopped to consider what it was costing him. That night, we argued. I told Ethan he was being too harsh and unfair to me. But now, looking back with a clear head, I think he was right. For years, I had forced my husband to stay silent while his mother kept inviting his ex to family events just to humiliate me. So let's hit pause on this story for a moment. What do you think? Was I truly at fault here? Or do you think I wasn't to blame? Let me know. Now, let's continue. Update 1. Tonight, I apologized to Ethan. I read the comments, thought a lot about it, and talked things through with a few close friends. And I came to the realization that he was absolutely right. I had put my own feelings above his. I was so focused on proving that Diana and Sharon's behavior didn't affect me that I never even considered how much it might have been affecting him. For his sake, I should have let him put an end to it when he wanted to. Instead, I made him suppress his feelings for years, all so I could play some twisted mental game with people I didn't even like. And in the end, I nearly jeopardized the only relationship that actually mattered to me. I had seriously screwed up, and I knew I needed to fix it. Since the night of the party, Ethan had been distant, and me? I had tried to act like it didn't bother me. That's my usual response to things like this. It's always been my problem I pretend nothing gets to me, even when it does. I like to think of myself as calm and unbothered, but deep down, I know that's just an unhealthy way of dealing with things. If I wanted to save my marriage, I needed to work on myself. So today, I skipped work, ordered Ethan's favorite food from his favorite restaurant, and bought a chocolate cake with the words, "I'm sorry," written on it. I went home, set up a beautiful dinner, dimmed the lights, and made everything as romantic as possible, because I knew he loved those over-the-top, movie-style apologies. And more importantly, because I truly regretted what I had put him through. When he came home that evening, he looked shocked, and within 15 minutes, he had already forgiven me. We had one of those teary, emotional reconciliations, and I actually broke down crying because, for the first time, I had been genuinely scared of losing him. When he stopped talking to me, it felt like my whole world was caving in. We talked everything through. I told him the real reason I had acted the way I did, the truth I had never admitted, even to myself, that I have this constant need to appear unbothered, detached, like nothing can shake me. And I don't even know why. It's just something I do. I didn't want to show vulnerability, didn't want them to think they had the power to upset me. That's the real reason all of this happened. Ethan understood, and he appreciated the fact that I wasn't just making excuses, I was actually willing to work on it. He also apologized for being harsh with me that night. After dinner, we finally talked about what happened at Sharon's party. I hadn't heard a single word from either Diana or Sharon since the party. And after everything with Ethan, I had honestly stopped thinking about them, but apparently, Sharon had not stopped thinking about us. She had been bombarding Ethan with messages, demanding that he apologize to Diana. Apparently, Diana was devastated over how he treated her. I had to physically stop myself from rolling my eyes when I read her messages. Sharon was doing what she always did, twisting things around, trying to manipulate Ethan into feeling guilty. She even tried to claim that the whole almost anniversary thing was just a harmless joke, that there was no ill intent behind it. Yeah, sure. We're talking about a married man, a man who had been with me for years, and we're supposed to believe that neither of them saw anything inappropriate about that stunt. No way. They knew exactly what they were doing. They planned it to humiliate me. And now, when it backfired, they were just trying to dismiss our feelings, acting like it was all in good fun. And of course, painting Ethan as the one who took things too far. The audacity was laughable. But Ethan wasn't falling for it. He ignored every single one of Sharon's messages. And after talking it through, we made a decision. We were done. That night, we blocked both Sharon and Diana on every platform. Ethan also told his dad that he no longer wanted to have contact with his mother. His father, as usual, stayed neutral. He respected Ethan's decision but refused to get involved. He loved his wife and wasn't willing to go against her, which, honestly, wasn't surprising. It's what he had done for years, stood back and let Sharon do whatever she wanted. I wasn't happy about it, but at this point, it didn't matter. Ethan and I were moving forward. Or so I thought. Update 2. 3 days ago, we cut Sharon and Diana out of our lives. For the first couple of days, everything was normal, peaceful even. And then, earlier today, I got a call from Ethan. He was on his way to the hospital. His uncle had called him out of nowhere, telling him that Sharon had fallen down the stairs and broken her leg. The moment he heard, he dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. And I was going with him. We arrived at the hospital around the same time, but before we could even step inside, we were stopped by Sharon, perfectly healthy. She and Diana had set us up in the parking lot. The whole falling down the stairs and breaking a leg thing? A complete lie. Just a pathetic, manipulative stunt to force Ethan to talk to them since he had blocked them everywhere. Clearly, they hadn't expected me to show up too, but they just ignored my presence and spoke to Ethan like nothing had happened. Diana immediately started with the same bullshit the almost anniversary thing had just been a joke, how she never meant to hurt him. And of course, Sharon backed her up, nodding along, pretending like they weren't the biggest gaslighting pair of lunatics on the planet. Ethan listened for a moment, and then, without hesitation, he told them both to go to hell right to their faces. And then we left. As we were about to get into our car, Sharon started screaming after us, but we didn't stop to listen. I'm sure she was cursing us out, playing the victim, trying to make us feel guilty. But it didn't matter. She had lied to get Ethan to see her, and I honestly couldn't think of anything more disgusting than that. Ethan was exhausted. He just wanted to go home. I had to head back to work. But while I was at work, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Sharon, and she was furious. I barely had time to react before she started shrieking at me over the phone. It was nothing but pure, unfiltered, rage-screaming insults, blaming me for everything. Like I had anything to do with how her own son felt about her. Like it wasn't her own actions that had driven him away. I hung up and blocked her immediately. That night, when I got home, Ethan and I talked. He told me he had also blocked every single relative who was still close to Sharon, including the uncle, who had been used as a pawn to lure him to the hospital. Because at this point, it was clear Sharon was willing to go to any lengths to manipulate him back into her life. Unfortunately, there was nothing more we could do legally. She wasn't threatening us. She wasn't stalking us. Yet. So we couldn't get a restraining order just yet. Ethan had also spoken to his dad about what happened. And, as always, his father refused to do anything. Just stood there, useless, refusing to step in, refusing to even try to get Sharon to back off. Ethan loves his dad, so I held my tongue. But truthfully, I don't respect him at all. The bare minimum a father should do is stand up for his son. But instead, he just stood by while Sharon emotionally wrecked him for years. I honestly don't know how Ethan comes from that family. Update 3. It's been over a week since my last update. And yesterday, we finally decided to file for a restraining order against both Sharon and Diana. Why? Because of what they did to me a few days ago. It was Thursday. I had just gotten off work. Usually on Thursdays, I stop by a little cafe near my office for a caramel latte. That day was no different, planned to do the same thing. But the moment I stepped inside, Diana and Sharon stood up from a corner table, and before I could even process what was happening, they threw their coffee in my face. I was too stunned to react. Diana even scooped up some whipped cream from her cup and smeared it into my hair. I just stood there in shock until the barista ran over to help me. The cafe staff did everything they could to help clean me up, and I owe them so much for it. They literally abandoned their stations just to make sure I was okay. The other customers were incredibly patient too, waiting quietly while I tried to get myself together. My clothes were ruined, sticky, stained, completely unwearable for work ever again. My hair was a disaster. But at least by the end of it, I felt somewhat clean again. Some other customers checked on me, making sure I was okay. One of them even asked if I wanted to call the police. I said yes. I pressed charges against both of them. Unfortunately, it was classified as a minor offense. They got off with just a fine, since technically, they didn't physically hurt me. The only real damage was to my clothes. But I still made sure to file an official report. This would go on record. This would follow them. At first, I wanted to make the whole thing public. Post about it, expose them, make sure people knew to stay the hell away from Diana and her psychotic mother-in-law fantasy. But in the end, Ethan convinced me not to. Because, at the end of the day, I just want to move on. And yet, the whole thing shook me. I know it sounds stupid. It was just coffee. Just a childish, petty attack. But it made me think, what if it had been more than coffee? What if they had actually hurt me? They knew my routine. They knew where I was, where I lived. They had been watching me, keeping track of my movements. If they were willing to ambush me in public, what else were they capable of? We had been thinking about moving for a while now, and after this, we're definitely leaving. We're also ready to start a family. Ethan and I have been talking about kids, and we're finally ready to try. But one thing is certain: his parents will never meet our children. We cut off his father completely after he once again refused to intervene, even after the coffee incident. Ethan got into a huge fight with him and then ended the relationship for good. And honestly, I feel nothing but relief. I will never have to see these people again. Thank you for your attention. Subscribe, leave a like, and have a great day.